I question why we're even deciding to negotiate with the Republicans.
Democratic Congressman Jamaal Bowman is hinting at a potential fight with Joe Biden over the infrastructure bill. So he was on CNN discussing this. Before I get to those clips, though, let me properly set this up. So, of course, this is over the fact that Joe Biden keeps on capitulating to Republican positions, even though Mitch McConnell has already said that they will oppose 100% of Joe Biden's agenda. So the only way they're going to sign off on anything is if it is, in fact, a Republican plan that Joe Biden gives into. So he's already started the process, as he's now raised the possibility he could take the proposed tax rate increase off the table. So that's the corporate tax rate increase. So it was at 35% under Barack Obama. Donald Trump lowered it to 21%. Now Biden wants to raise it to 28% potentially, which, again, is not even Obama levels. But, of course, the GOP against any increase to the corporate tax rate. So they're against all of this. Biden now saying, well, maybe we'll do it, in a separate bill. But at the same time, he's also saying that there would be a floor of 15% minimum. So this would be designed for companies like Amazon that get away paying nothing in taxes. But again, still, we're talking numbers that are way too low for where they should be and where they were before. So he's been dealing with Shelley Moore Capito. She's the lead negotiator for the GOP on this infrastructure plan. And the gap is so wide. So Biden still, he's given now into $1 trillion. His initial plan was $2 trillion for the infrastructure plan. Now he's saying the bill needs to include at least $1 trillion in new money. And Republicans are at a max of $250 billion. So there's a massive gap between $1 trillion and $250 billion. Obviously, there is no way to close this gap unless Biden gives completely in to Republicans, which I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But with that said, Biden also needs Democratic votes. So they have a slim majority in the House. If enough progressives sign off on not signing off on this bill, on not voting for this bill, then there's no way it's going to get through. Jamaal Bowman tweeted out here, if what I'm reading is true, based on this article in the Washington Post, I would have a very hard time voting yes on this bill. $2 trillion was already the compromise. POTUS can't expect us to vote for an infrastructure deal dictated by the Republican Party. One last thing before I get to this clip. When this infrastructure bill first came about, I discussed how, you had people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, others coming out and saying that $2 trillion was too low, that they want to see $10 trillion over, I believe it was 8 years or 10 years. And of course, we've heard nothing since then about that. But now you have Joe Biden not even dealing with Democrats at all and continuing to try to deal with or give in to Republicans and what they want. So here is Jamaal Bowman on CNN discussing his opposition to this idea of cutting the infrastructure bill.
Biden tonight, meets with Senator Capito and says no to her latest offer. But he'd already agreed to cut the price tag nearly in half and to drop that corporate tax increase. Do you think he should go back on those terms? Try to push the price tag back up?
So Biden ran on an infrastructure bill that was north of $2 trillion. Yep. Because that was the number, progressives organized across the country to make sure Biden won the election, specifically in Georgia, in Michigan, and places like Pennsylvania. To go from over $2 trillion to $1.7 trillion should never have been done. And to try to cut it further definitely should not be done. We have 100-year-old infrastructure. We have children getting lead poisoning from drinking out of lead pipes. We have public housing that hasn't received any money from the federal government in over 10 years. And when you speak to climate organizers and activists and scholars and infrastructure scholars, they say the number needs to be much higher. This is our New Deal moment. We have just lost over 600,000 people due to COVID in 1 year. We lost that many people in the Civil War over 4 years. What was our response? It was the Homestead Act. It was the Industrial Revolution. We invested in bringing the American economy back. We need to do the same thing now, beginning with the working people in our most marginalized communities.
So, okay, so I understand where you stand on this, but the thing about Biden is, even though he said no to the latest GOP proposal tonight, after speaking with the lead Republican negotiator, he is going to speak to Senator Capito again on Monday. So should he even be doing that? I mean, I understand there's lots of ways to look at this, but I can look at it and say, going from 1.7 trillion to 1 trillion, when the other side goes from 250 billion to 300 billion, one side's moving a lot more than the other, and the two sides are still really far apart.
So I question why we're even deciding to negotiate with the Republicans. Republicans have not tried to negotiate with us in good faith since Biden has been in the White House. They pushed the big lie, which led to the insurrection. They voted to overturn the election results. It did not support an impeachment, even though Donald Trump was clearly at fault there. I understand, wanting to engage in bipartisanship, but they have not negotiated with us and tried to engage with us in good faith since this session has begun. We can use reconciliation to get this done. We have enough Democratic votes, and we need to do so because the American people sent us there to deliver. And as Democrats, we have to deliver. That is how we win the midterms next year, not negotiating with Republicans who do not want to negotiate in good faith.
All right. I have one more clip coming up on Joe Manchin on that same in that same interview. But first, of course, when you even have Erin Burnett, the CNN host there, recognizing that Joe Biden has moved a lot more in these negotiations than Republicans have. I mean, when even the mainstream press acknowledges that what Biden is giving into here is a little extreme, then you know he's gone too far. So you have here Jamaal Bowman not saying in this discussion that he would vote against it, but he should be saying that in these interviews as well as, of course, he just said it on Twitter. But he needs to keep putting this idea out there that they're going to vote against an infrastructure plan that is less than $2 trillion. Because if Biden is then forced to negotiate with both, Democrats and Republicans, then there really is no point of negotiating with Republicans, and he's going to have to at least get his own caucus on board with the infrastructure plan, and then essentially try and push Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to vote with it as well. And I guess attempt to get it through budget reconciliation if that's possible, meaning it would only require 51 votes. Otherwise, it would need 60 votes, which you're not going to get with Democrats only controlling half the Senate. So just not going to happen. But before I get to the next clip, I just want to share this one tweet here from Jamaal Bowman saying, when Donald Trump cut the corporate tax rate from 35 to 21%, it wasn't bipartisan. Not a single Democrat voted in favor. There's no reason that we need to be bipartisan in repealing the tax cut. So it's an important point to make, but it should be obvious to anyone paying attention. Of course, Republicans have no interest at all in bipartisanship when they're in power. But all of a sudden, Democrats are in power, and they cry and cry and cry that Joe Biden isn't working hard enough to get the GOP on board with them. It's so completely disingenuous, so stupid that the idea that anybody, whether it's a listener, whether it's a viewer, whether it's a host on a news show, whether it's a politician, that anybody should be giving in to right-wing Republican framing on this is just completely absurd. Obviously, they're full of shit. Obviously, they have no interest at all in working with Joe Biden and simply want to push their own agenda. And if that means rejecting 100% of Biden's agenda, then they'll do that because they simply do not care about bipartisanship. They simply do not care at all about actually passing anything that would actually help people. Last clip here with Jamaal Bowman on this interview.
Okay, so I understand your point on Republicans, but a big part of why Biden is in this position is because of Democrats, right? Senator Joe Manchin, Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Manchin has been insistent on bipartisanship. He just spoke to our own Manu Raju and said he's not going to do this alone. He's not going to do this just Democrats. Here's what he said.
We've got to work together, and that takes a lot of time and energy and patience. You can only do so much by yourself.
I mean, Senator Manchin is refusing to support a party line vote in the Senate. So even if you were to go that route, this bill cannot become law without him. So what do you say to Senator Manchin?
Senator Manchin has to realize, yes, he represents West Virginia, but he represents the American people. And the policies that progressives are pushing for are policies that are popular with the American people. Lowering drug prices, investing in the care economy, rebuilding our crumbling school infrastructure. We introduced the Care for All agenda, which is a resolution that centers care as the rebirth of our economy. That is very popular amongst the American people. So is investing in our school infrastructure. So is lowering drug prices. I encourage Senator Manchin to look at what's been happening with water quality in West Virginia for many years, what's happening with poverty in West Virginia for many years, but also what's happening with the American people overall. This is our moment. History is going to tell this story, and it's going to tell a story of us either responding to the needs of the majority of the American people or responding to large corporations and the wealthy elite. It's time for us to build an economy that works as a multiracial democracy, not to do business as usual in the way that we claim is responsible governance, but it hasn't met the mark of those who are marginalized, which is the majority of the American people.
All right, so there really isn't much else to say here about, Joe Manchin. Obviously, the guy is a conservative in Democrat clothing, as are, to be fair, a lot of Democrats. But he's a guy who essentially is a Republican and is, ringing the bell over bipartisanship when he knows he's not stupid. Joe Manchin knows that Republicans have no interest ever in bipartisanship. Joe Manchin is simply using this as a cover for him to be pro-corporate. So all of what Jamaal Bowman here is saying is exactly right, spot on, great. But, this fight means nothing if you don't actually fight with your votes as well. So if they don't vote against the infrastructure plan, assuming it's not, at the $2 trillion or higher where it should be, then if they don't vote against it, then all of this means nothing. They can't keep going out there and saying what they're saying and not actually put any real actions behind those words, because now they actually have some real power. They have enough members in the Progressive Caucus to vote against Joe Biden bills that simply are not good enough and use their power the same way that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema use their power and Republicans use their power. These progressives in the House can use their power as a voting bloc to vote against a conservative bipartisan bill. And again, even when we talk about bipartisanship, you saw how the American Rescue Plan, Joe Manchin fought to cut unemployment checks, to cut the stimulus checks, and still not a single Republican voted for that bill. So Democrats negotiated against themselves, got less for the American people, and still not a single Republican vote. So all this bipartisanship is just complete bullshit. They didn't even vote to investigate the insurrection. It's all complete crap. So unless Joe Biden actually, publicly acknowledges that, then this is all just, it's all just theater. This is all just bullshit. So let's see if progressives actually have it in them to vote against a bill that simply is not good enough.